everyone. Welcome back to Purple Nuna Podcast. I'm Stephanie Conti, and I'm here with the Ann Wells to my Lion Burke. That's an oldie. That's an old
Ooh,
reference.
scandalous.
Savannah Lanause.
Hi, how are you? How's pharmacy school?
It's good so far. I just accomplished my first week in pharmacy school. Right now, I'm currently attending an online pharmacy school program, which is nice because I have to leave my little room. But yeah, like it's all online. It's going well so far. It's tough. It's a lot. Like I was talking to Zach. I was like, it's a lot. It's a lot of work, you know. He was like, Stephanie, it's pharmacy school.
Yeah.
Like you're in with the big boys now. But so far, so good. So with that being said, I just did want to say a little disclaimer. Between now and for the next foreseeable 4 years, right now it's definitely going to be limited to one podcast a week. We might change it up during like winter break, summer break, because Savannah's on school too, in school as well. But yeah, if there's any like late podcast or if, we're still trying to do everything Sundays at noon, but if there's anything a little bit later and stuff like that, it's because the schedule window is a little bit tighter right now for me to get everything done. But alas, we're still recording. We're still going to go.
We're still here.
We're still here. We're still loud and proud. And with that being said, so another two announcement. One, shout out to our main squeeze, Zachary, my boyfriend, who graduated.
Yay!
He graduated. He is now a certified audio engineer. So if he works for Purple Noon, but not just for Purple Noon, if you know what I mean. So if you need a really nice and sweet and very handsome, might I add, audio engineer, he's your guy. And then also, a listener and dear friend of ours, Sylvia, she recently got into a pretty bad accident here in Florida. And down below, like, yeah, everything going on in the world is already crappy enough, but she's kind of been hit with a really bad and unfortunate situation with this car accident.
Yeah.
There is a GoFundMe link in the page. Donate if you can, no pressure. But really, the biggest thing that we ask is that you do share it. Just to get more traction and stuff. Because in that accident, not only did she end up with a bunch of bruises, she has a severe concussion, a little bit of memory loss too. And yeah, her car was completely destroyed. So if you could check out her story, share it around, we highly, highly appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Savannah, we kind of briefly before, because we always chit chat before we do the deep reviews. Now, we don't get into too much detail because obviously we got to save it for the reviews.
Yes.
But with these films that we've chosen today, there's a little bit of a theme, and that's 60s infidelity and flirtation.
I called Stephanie up, or she called me up after, I think it was The Swimmer that we were going to review. And I kind of asked her, I was like, was that a thing? Did people just flirt with each other's wives and husbands in front of each other?
It was a thing. So we're talking about two movies that we're going to be discussing today are The Swimmer and Valley of the Dolls. And in Valley of the Dolls, you get a little glimpse of it, like especially some of the characters and like the cheating and the everything. But in The Swimmer, you have Burt Lancaster just going around flirting with women in front of their husbands, and it's like, what? Kissing the feet of them too, like getting a little grabby and handsy.
And the funny thing is, like, the husbands don't, like, it's like normal. You know what I mean? Nobody said anything. Nobody acted like it wasn't. It was just very accepted. So I don't know if we're from obviously a very different generation, so maybe we don't know. Or you also made the point that they could be swingers. We don't know. This could be very different situations.
Yeah, for anyone who lives in Central Florida or knows anything about Central Florida, I call The Swimmer oh my God, what's the neighborhood? What's the neighborhood that I mentioned?
The Villages.
The Villages. If The Villages was a movie and it's in all of their inhabitants' prime, like really. But so do you want to talk about The Swimmer first? Like we totally forgot to discuss how we were going to break down things. So how do you want to do this? Swimmer, then maybe Le Chanteuche d'Irene, and then Valley of the
Yeah.
Dolls?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good we'll do it. Let's do it.
All right, I'll do a little intro for the swimmer. So the swimmer was actually requested by a friend of mine named Connor. I
Mm.
put his little Instagram handle in the bio below. I believe it's D Connor Stevens, but it's down below. And he had messaged me and was like, "Hey, you guys should review this film." And I was like, I've never heard of the swimmer. And he was like, it's a great film. And then looking it up, I was very surprised at actually how it kind of had like this little cult following to it. So, for those of you who do not know, The Swimmer is a movie that came out in 1968. It's about a man who spends his summer days swimming as many pools as he can all over a quiet suburban town. It was directed by Frank Perry, written by Eleanor Perry, and it stars notably Burt Lancaster, Janice Rule, Kim Hunter, a bunch of other familiar faces here and there, even including Joan Rivers at one point. So, before we get deep into the review and what did we think, Savannah, what did you think of The Swimmer?
You know, I was very surprised at the direction the movie took because
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning it's very bright colored. It's very like, 60s pop. I don't know how else to explain it. So you kind of think this is gonna be like a funny story, or like that's kind of the impression I got. Like, oh, this guy's weird, but it
Yeah.
actually does take a turn, and I was impressed on how subtly they were able to pull it off. So I was really actually impressed with the movie. I thought Burt Lancaster was very good.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there were some things that were kind of strange, and we'll get into it. But
Yeah.
I was surprised for the most part. I was. It's a good surprise. What about you?
I was pleasantly surprised as well. From the moment it started, I could tell, I was like, okay, so this is unlike any other film from this time period and from our period as well. And because it starts off with this very campy and cheesy idea where
Yeah.
you have Burt Lancaster's character Ned Merrill going, I'm gonna travel home and I'm gonna swim my way home. And like you said, you think it's very light and you think it's very comedic. But as you realize, the closer and closer he gets to his home, more and more things begin to unravel about his life. And it
Yeah.
kind of like even lies that like seem like, and not lies so much, more like facades that he's explained to us as a viewer, like whether he's talking to younger children, things like that. It's just everything is just kind of popped open at the seams,
Yeah.
which I thought was a really great and innovative concept. And I can see why this film has a cult following because it really is different in terms of storytelling. Like, I haven't seen a film like this that reveals it this way. And I also just do want to add from the get go, we're Twin Peaks fans. We've talked about Twin Peaks before. I was like, this is like Ray Wise's character, Leland Pullman, but in the summer, just slowly declining. I got real Ray Wise Twin Peaks vibes from this. And I say that with love. Like, I love that. But it was definitely, you could tell that this guy was just a little too cheery and it just
Yeah.
slowly starts descending into craziness. Now we got to talk about Burt Lancaster in this film because the fact that he was 52 in this film,
Yeah.
doing all all the swimming, all the it's even like the same wardrobe. Which, by the way, they had like 17 pairs of the same trunks on set. But
They
to
did.
be
Oh,
able,
that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, just in case if anything ripped or whatever. But I was very impressed with Burt Lancaster. The
Yeah.
only real, I think the only real film I've seen with him in it is The Leopard, which
Yeah.
is definitely a huge, like, it's kind of like they are almost unrecognizable in this sense. And I think they came out almost similar. Like, I think they came out in the same time frame. I could be wrong, but I have to look that up.
Yeah.
But what did you think of Burt Lancaster in this film?
I was impressed, honestly, because so like you, I haven't seen a lot of his films, and not that he wasn't good in his other films, I just didn't notice him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, so when I saw him in this film and what he was doing and his decline, again, I think subtlety is probably the hardest form of acting. And
Mm-hmm.
how he went from this happy, I'm flirting with all the ladies, I'm the man kind of guy, to somebody that's revealed to be in a horrible situation is very good on his part, and I was impressed. I don't think he gets enough credit, especially for this movie.
Yeah, and he does say that this film was actually in his own opinion, like he's claimed this film to be his best film.
Wow.
Of his acting and his work and stuff. And although I do not know a lot of his like filmography in terms of what he's been in and stuff, like I've never really dived into the world of Burt Lancaster. I was impressed because there is a certain way you can carry this type of character that is Ned Merrill
Yeah.
without it being too far. And he always like there's like it's almost like a tightrope of a character where if you teeter on one side, it goes into corny and just and then the other side is just doesn't make sense, is just too much. And he had like a really good balance of like not tipping over too far into either of those sides. I
You know
also
where
liked
oh, sorry.
no,
Sorry.
no, no. Tell
No,
me,
no,
tell me,
no.
tell me.
I just realized where I know him from besides The Leopard. You ever
What?
see, From Here to Eternity?
No, I actually haven't.
You
Don't
have
don't.
It's the famous scene with the couple kissing on the beach.
Yes.
You know what it is, yeah. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, there's no way you don't know." That's where I know him from, and I feel like I'm gonna get crucified, but I didn't think he was great in the
And
movie.
From Here to Eternity?
No, like, I think he was average. Does that make sense? So,
That's fair.
I think that's why I'm so surprised that he's good. But I'm sorry I interrupted you, continue.
No, you're good. You're good. But yeah, like, anyways, I didn't really. One thing that surprises me is that, believe it or not, I thought The Leopard was filmed later on, but apparently The Leopard was 5 years before this, which is
Really?
weird because they did an impeccable job at aging him
Yeah,
in The
'cause I was gonna
Leopard
say he
because he
looks
looked like in his
older.
60s at the time, for
Yeah,
sure.
he looks
But
old.
I really liked what he did with his eyes. He's one of those actors who can definitely act, and he has these, and very good casting because, and I don't even know if he wore contacts or what, but he has crystal blue pool eyes of
Yeah,
blue,
yeah.
and it just worked so well. And he was able, because they did a lot of close up with his eyes and like his and you could kind of just see like almost in his eyes like things just kind of slipping away, like the facade he put up himself just kind of fading away
Yeah.
whenever they did like those zoom shots in his eyes. And you kind of see like a part of him longing for what he once had, longing for a life he once. And before we get into, well, let's get into the story.
Okay, we can.
Because one of the things I really liked about this film was they gave you enough information, but not everything, to
Yeah,
kind of keep you wondering.
I agree. I think, again, the movie does a really good job at not spoon feeding us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't need to know the whole story. We need to know kind of basically what happened, and they do a good job at giving us enough without giving us like the entire story. Um, so I'm trying to think. The beginning of the movie, it takes place at his friend's house, right? It's not his own
Mm-hmm.
house. No, yeah.
Yeah, no, and he doesn't reach his home until the very, very end,
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
which is kind of like the big reveal. And he calls his way of traveling to the pool the Lucinda River. How do you feel
Yeah.
that we never actually got to see his wife Lucinda?
I think that's an interesting take on the story because we find out some stuff about her and we find out some stuff that he did.
Yeah.
And I think we're supposed to form our own opinion about his wife because a lot of the time his friends, some of them were like, oh, Lucinda, and other of them were like, oh, Lucinda. So I think we're supposed to form our own opinion about who she really is and how
Yeah.
maybe she is as a person. Because, the tone of the film switches from like Lucinda might be like annoying or like just a bad wife to we see some of his actions. And we're kind of just like, you know what? Maybe Lucinda isn't, in the wrong, clearly. So I think the movie sets us up to form our own opinion about his wife because we also see everybody else's wife, which is interesting.
Yeah, we see and him interact with literally everyone else's wife in like a
Yeah.
provocative way, whether it be kissing their feet, painting their a lot of foot stuff. A lot of foot stuff. I'm taking note of that, Eleanor Perry. But it was I really did like the fact that they didn't show her because I think the whole point, even though it kind of centers around the theme of Lucinda,
Yeah.
it's not about her. It's about him.
Yeah.
And I think if we would have seen her and given her a face and stuff, we would have made it, like we would have put the blame on Lucinda. When at the end
Right.
of the day, here is, Ned Merrill. And he is a man who makes his own decisions and wants to make his own facades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, I liked also how it wasn't like continuous. Like some people were nice about Lucinda, some people were just mean and awful about Lucinda.
Right.
And also the same way they treated him. Some people were great and nice and were like, "We missed you, we missed you." Other people were like, "Where's our money? What's gonna happen?" Now, what did you think about his interaction with Ed? This kind of was a gray area for me of not knowing how I felt.
Mm.
His interaction with the young girl.
So, okay, creepy but necessary, and I'm going to explain.
Yes.
This is the part where we find out he's going through some kind of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially he stumbles upon an old friend's house and their kids are there. And one of these girls are like the babysitter of the kids. And they kind of just go off. Very weird. I don't know, because I've babysat a nanny and I just can't picture myself doing that. Like, okay, let me go off with this 53-year-old man who's as old as my dad. But this girl eventually says how much she had a crush on him. And basically was professing her like childhood love for him. And she even goes as far as saying, "Do you remember when she was like, oh, I stole your shirt?"
Yeah.
That's it. I was like, oh God. But the creepy part is when he is kind of like, "I'll take care of you. Let's go away." And that to me is a breakdown. Right.
Yeah.
That shows like he's going through some kind of midlife crisis. He's trying to chase some kind of youth, maybe.
It felt like he wasn't it didn't feel so much as like predatory behavior in a way where it felt like a lost man kind of trying to reclaim years he's lost and trying to think as if like, oh yeah, like he could start over again with a young and pretty girl. And
Yeah.
I think he just like, and that was his outlet. Meanwhile, it's like that never was going to work, and I think he knew it, and that's why nothing ever came to fruition.
Again, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it was one of those things where, and he even talks to her about his wife and how they met when they were really young and how
Mm-hmm.
it was romantic. And maybe he was trying to live out some kind of fantasy where he was young again and, this girl is as young as his wife was. Another strange aspect about this movie, he brings this girl holding her hand to another pool party and nobody says anything.
Yeah, I think
I
don't know. I think it was because
wow,
maybe
like
since in the setting everyone knew everyone, it seemed, and it was easy for them to not to suspect anything. Like if like I'm very close with my neighbors. So if like me and my neighbor who's way older than me and is almost in his 70s, if me and him were walking hand in hand to a place, I don't think the people might today be like, "Oh, that's weird," but they know each other. They're like family. Like they wouldn't like it wouldn't be more than that. But at the end of the day, like this also girl said, like, "Hey, I haven't seen you in years. I thought about you when I was a
yeah.
child." And it's just like weird. I thought it was necessary because it did show like a sketchy element to his life and his train of thought.
Yes.
But it was still weird. Well, okay, we got to talk about the horse thing. We got to talk about
That
them
was
galloping around like little horses.
that was such a long scene.
It was so
Why?
long. It was like 6 minutes.
I sped through it a little bit. I was like, okay, 3 minutes is enough. Like, I don't need to see this for more than a minute.
At least do it in real time too. Like they just showed it in slow motion.
No, it would have been weird in real time. It would just be
Oh, that's
galloping
true.
around.
That's true. But that was a little bit weird, but I still thought it was a necessary part. And I don't think it harmed the film. I think it added more of a deeper element to it that was kind of uncomfortable to think about, but still very necessary for the character.
I did want to point out though something that like was my first red flag. And maybe this was yours too. So when he actually first sees do you know her name?
I do not
I don't
remember
remember.
the
Yeah.
babysitter's name.
But when he sees her, he goes, because he has daughters, and he goes, "Oh, I'll call you. Well, me and Lucinda will always need a babysitter." And she kind of looks at him like, "What? You're a babysitter? Like, your daughters would freak, like, as if, like, your daughters are grown up.
Yeah.
So, like, that was my first red flag of him, like, that's a little weird. So,
Yeah. And then that's kind of in the end. So let's talk about how things kind of break down. And I
yeah.
thought the setting of everything was perfect in an overcrowded pool. Like everything else had been like in all the places that he goes to is crowded in some way, like slowly begins to become more crowded,
Yeah.
whether it be parties and or whether it be the one woman who he had drama with, who he was supposedly in love with at one point, but in the end it ends at a point where it's a public pool and it is completely filled with people people he know who are pointing fingers at him saying, oh, how's this, like really just giving it to
Yeah.
him raw and mean. um from what I gathered, it seemed like he seemed like almost very, I don't want to say stereotypic, but kind of like the downfall of a basic entrepreneur where he
Mhm.
lost money and then he lost his wife became, you know, upset and then she took it out on everyone and was like, head of like the committee and just was super rude to everyone. And then I think I might have heard this right. His kids, when they grew up, ended up becoming like drunk drivers.
Yeah, yeah. That I did hear that. I don't know. I think that was the only thing said though. But yeah, apparently like they crashed the car or something.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like all those little reasons don't matter as to the final fact is that in the end it's
Yeah.
revealed that he failed as a father and he failed as a husband in some
Right.
way, shape, or form.
Right.
Now, so after that one bit, he storms to his house. I'm assuming he doesn't live there anymore.
No, no, no. I don't think so. It was like abandoned.
Yeah, an abandoned house. And it wasn't there points where people were like, you still live? You still live? I thought you moved.
Yeah, yeah. People were like, "Oh," because I think everyone was confused when he was saying he was going to swim home. So I think that has to do with it.
Well, I mean, also, it's not like there's a river that would take him home. So I could see people going, what do you mean you're going to swim home? And he's like, I'm going to hop from pool to pool to pool. But, like, I can see that. But I
Yeah.
think also, maybe that could have been like a double way, like a double meaning. Um, Now, is there any, with this film, um, what would you say are your favorite aspects of this film?
I think we all see the typical midlife crisis in men in films, right? They go buy a
Yeah.
car, they my example of it is, you ever see I think it's American Beauty?
No. And I know people are going to go, what? No, I have not. I
So
know about it,
no, yeah,
but
it's Kevin Spacey film. It's very old. Um
very old. It came out in the 90s, Savannah.
I just wanted to say that so they know I don't support him. It's not a recent film,
Okay.
guys. I don't support that. But no, I saw it like a few years ago, and for me, that's what I based a man going through a mid crisis on. Somebody that was trying to be younger, trying to get with younger women. What was I gonna say? Buying new cars, being crazy. That's kind of my idea of this, and I thought the fact that he was still trying to live in this picture perfect facade, like picture perfect, where he was with his family and everything, and he was put together. He was like a ladies' man, all this stuff, and
Like he really tried to enforce every aspect, even to the point of location where he was living, not just
yeah,
the facade of his own well-being.
exactly. So I never seen that, and I've never seen, because at the end of the day, him going from pool to pool to pool to sort of prolong him from going home, that's to me a sign of a mental breakdown. And the way they showed you that without spoon feeding you, without revealing it very slowly, is fantastic. And
Hmm.
I've never seen a movie like that to do it like that. So I'm very impressed. Uh,
My favorite film that I would say is like the breakdown of a male's psyche is Last Tango in Paris.
yeah.
And what this movie has that Last Tango in Paris doesn't, is because it's similar. Last Tango in Paris is a guy who goes for the young girl and tries to, at some point, especially later in the film of Last Tango in Paris, tries to create this facade. I've never said facade more times than I am right now, but tries to create this facade that everything is okay and that he's kind of wiped away the memory of what happened and created something new, but almost exactly the same. But I think what this film takes it even further is not only because everyone's like, oh my God, you look great. You can tell that he went to every step of his way to physically be back in that time zone where everything was
Oh,
good.
good point.
To and like physically in both of his own sense of his body and his location. He really just tried to take like a giant, leap back into time and just put himself and everyone's like, hey, where have you been? And he just kind of just shows up like, hey, as if they've been neighbors again. Which if they were really neighbors, it wouldn't have been weird for him to just start dropping in, you know?
Right, exactly.
So I think it's just, and then him like, I think also with his financially too, you can tell that he tries to act more financially stable than he is in the current situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like how in every element, in every way, Ned Merrill is, he tries to take a leap back into time and then tries to reconstruct what he once had.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. What do you give the film? What rating?
Ooh, I think I'm feeling 8.1.
Okay, I was feeling 8.5. I give it
8.1.
8.5.
I do like the directing. I did think though that at some moments, um, I love the coloring. I love the most choices of the scene, but I felt like including like the horse scene and some other scenes in between were just unnecessary. And it
Yeah.
did slightly take away from the main plot and like what we needed to focus on.
Yeah.
That's why I'd say I'd pull it back. But a lot of in this film, I would definitely say too is also over the top. Like the next two films we're going to be talking about, really. So before we get into Valley of the Dolls, let's real quickly go over Le Chant du Styrene. So Le Chant du Styrene is a short film available on the Criterion Collection. Came out in 1958, and it's a poetic and aesthetic visit of a large polystyrene factory. And it is directed by Alain Resnais. And Resnais is actually the director of Hiroshima Mon Amour. So I'm a big fan of his work, and I really
Love
love
it.
Hiroshima. I just chose this film because when I was looking through everything, it really fit with the look of all three of these films.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
So it's just a little I think it's very interesting to look at, especially like who would think like, oh, it's kind of like how it's made but make it chic.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
so I really like it's doesn't have a lot of substance to it, but it definitely was like an interesting documentary style
Experience.
concept. What was that last part you said?
No, I said it's definitely like you were saying interesting. I was like an experience.
Yeah, and I just want to add it in there just to get some more things off our Criterion list off, and it just really went with the style. And to be specific, the style I think would be appropriate to call this is very like French pop. Valley of the
Yeah.
Dolls, the swimmer. Even though the swimmer doesn't play around too much with color, it really only like color scales. It really just plays around with blues. Um, it still has a certain like 60s zhezhe pop, French pop style to it all,
Yeah.
especially like the close-ups and the zooms and in the swimmer.
Yeah.
So what do you give? There's not a lot to say about Le Chant du Styrene, but do you have any comments on it? What was your score of
Uh,
Le Chant du Styrene?
it briefly at some moments reminded me of two or three things I know about her.
I
I
could
think it
definitely
was
see that.
like the narration and like at some points they made like comments. So I was like, okay, this reminds me of that movie. Um, I give it like a 7 out of 10. I like the color. I thought it was pretty good. Again, there's not
7
like
out of
much
10 feels good.
like there's
That
not
feels
much
good.
talk about it, but I didn't like I enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, it was just like I said, I we've been doing like the 3 a week, and I was like, you know what? This looks like it would be a part of like the same directing, same genre almost,
Yeah.
in terms of like color scale and like the way it looks, the aesthetic of everything. I give it a 7 too. It's interesting. There's not a lot to it, but it's definitely good directing. It's really beautiful color work and stuff like that. And definitely in terms of like for any film students or anyone curious like about this genre, I would definitely if point to this film in terms of directing and coloring.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
All right, so would you like to lead into Valley of the Dolls, or would you like me to? Your
I
pick.
would. Thanks.
Yes, of course.
Um, so Valley of the Dolls is a movie that was based on the Jacqueline Susan novel. It's called Valley of the Dolls. And it's basically a timeline of the rise and fall of three women in Hollywood. It stars Barbara Perkins, Patty Duke, Paul Burke, and Sharon Tate, and was directed by Mark Robson and came out in 1967. So Steph, I know you were the actually this was one of the first movies we watched together. How did you stumble upon Valley of the Dolls?
I can wholeheartedly say I have no idea how I stumbled upon Valley of the Dolls because I found it before it was added into the Criterion Collection. I
Really?
think I it might have been on my old Tumblr days, and I think I might have seen some of the like stills from the film, and it piqued my interest. I liked the way it looked. I think it was the scene with Patty Duke as Neely O'Hara when she's working out and training. I saw
Yeah.
that scene. I was like, that's different to be in a movie. And so I gave the movie a chance. And ever since then, I call it my guilty pleasure. It is my favorite guilty pleasure film because I do not think it's the best film ever made, but I just really love a lot of elements of the film. And I would definitely consider it in my top 10. But
Yeah.
it kind of like at first to me, because with the drama and stuff like that, it was like if all those like daytime shows like out Days of Our Lives, The Sand, whatever they're called, was actually good and actually like had a lot of substance and value. And I think also I was very shocked for the time period on how much they degraded Hollywood, kind of tore down the glitz and glam of Hollywood, and
Yeah.
showed a very truthful side to it without with a sense of brutality to it.
Yeah. No, I think I agree. You don't, especially for that time, like you're saying, there's not a lot of movies that were talking about um what was going on with women in Hollywood. We just came out of in the 60s, the glitz and glamour age of Hollywood, the 40s, the 50s, the Ginger Rogers era, the Rita Hayworth that would just put Hollywood on a shrine. And then I
Yeah.
think Valley of the Dolls, they showed us three very different stories of what could happen to you when you
Yeah, and I think also having Patty Duke in there, this was right after, because Patty Duke had her own show.
yeah.
Patty Duke was a household name. And then for her, this was her first, like, aside from The Miracle Worker, this was like her first big movie after filming the Patty Duke show. She wanted to do something more adult, more, realistic. And I thought that was crazy to just think that she, went from in a second childhood sweetheart to now starring in a film that shows the reality and almost like a huge glimpse into what she had to go through.
Yeah, and I think well, I mean, if we're going to be honest, I think she's really the powerhouse of the movie. Um,
Oh, wait, I love Patty Duke. Patty Duke is one of my favorite actresses of all time. I think
yeah.
she is just a powerhouse in everything she's in.
So, yeah, I think and I mean her story is also very, tale as old as time in Hollywood. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like that's kind of you either have the Barbara Perkins where, some people walk away, they get it, but then you have the Neely O'Haras that
Hmm.
rise to fame and shoot right down. So I think her story is probably the most important as well.
And I thought for this film, I think all three female characters are extremely well written and well developed. They are
Yeah.
each in their own way different. They have their own different struggles, and they overlap in some circumstances, but not all the time. You have, and I think it was with just using three characters the broadest way to exemplify Hollywood. You have the women who don't mean to get into Hollywood, but they get lucky. You
Yeah.
have the Neely O'Haras who work and work and work to get into Hollywood, rise up to that fame, and then fall. And then you have someone, Sharon Tate's character, Jennifer North, that gets in and kind of starts fading out, but then is left with no choice but to diverge and divulge into an even uglier, not so much talked about side of Hollywood. Which is it fair to consider, like, even for that time period, those artsy French films as kind of like a sex industry for back then?
So here's the thing, I don't know. Like, I don't really
I
know.
wouldn't consider it for today's time. No, I think it would be very different. But for back then, because they did have that, artsy French films, and it ended up just kind of being borderline porn.
Yeah, so I think that's what the story wants us to believe, because I don't know if it was actual porn that she was doing, um, or kind of just like nude films. But I feel like the story pushes more towards like kind of porn. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there's definitely and there's definitely like I remember reading about like actresses. What reminded me of like Jennifer North years later was actress Heather Graham. I believe it was before Heather Graham was in Austin Powers. She had nowhere to go and almost did a pornographic film just to start making money.
Yeah, it's
And I
really
believe,
bad.
I'm pretty sure, because I was very surprised to hear about that. But I think Sharon Tate's character depicts a side of Hollywood, air quote, that we do not get to see often. And it's like when you need money, and sadly, everyone just wants to look at you for your face and your body. Where do you go?
Yeah, and I think she's obviously the most heartbreaking part of the story because she's not this promiscuous, like she's not seen as this, promiscuous. She's actually very sweet in the movie. Um, I'd say she's pretty much on the same wavelength as I can't remember her name, but I know the Barbara Perkins. What was her name in the movie? Why am I blanking it?
Ann Wells.
Anne. I thought she was just as sweet as Anne. I thought she was just as, she was obviously gorgeous, but I think the movie just tells us like there's a lot of tragedy in Hollywood and there's nothing that she could have done.
Mm-hmm.
She just ended up in a really bad situation. So, um she's definitely the if Neely is the heart, Jennifer is the soul.
Absolutely. And I think also like this film, I don't normally care for remakes, redos. This film, if you took this plot, if it was adapted to a TV show, I think people would appreciate it a lot more.
Oh, I
Because
would
I think
love that.
for me, where I think this film rises, it gives you a lot of stuff to digest. I like that. I like complexities. I like being given a lot of stuff to digest in a film, but I know not everyone does. So, and I think also it would have sharpened the connections between this woman if the all these women, if we got to see them over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, because in reality, like, what was the connection between like the deep connection between Jennifer and Neely, aside from the place that they work together?
I have
Like,
no
what made
idea.
them want to hang out, you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
what was that?
no, I'm trying to think because you bring up a good point. I don't know why like they were friends besides like coworkers. And then even Anne and Jennifer, I don't know what the real connection was there either, besides
Mm-hmm.
like an acquaintance or the work. So you make a good point that we don't really see how the friendship develops. They're just friends.
And then also the relationships. Like, I really like when it first starts off and you see Neely with oh, what was her first boyfriend's name? Hold
Ted
on.
is Ted.
No. Mel. Ted is the one who she
Oh,
gets into drama with. The
okay,
first
you're
one is
right.
Mel. And I really wish that we could have seen that more. So that way, when they did go to the point where they did split off, it was more impactful. It was more
Yeah.
powerful. And I really got to just say, I love how over the top this film, especially how over the top Neely is.
So dramatic, yeah.
So dramatic. I mean, like, there's so many other elements to part like that was just over the top with all three, but the best is Neely. And even though they're not very, she has some quotes today that don't work for today's setting.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
have to say that I still love the over top of it. Like, especially when she has this, and she uses a slur because it was just popular at the time,
Yeah.
which, I mean, I was still very surprised they still said the slur back in that time frame in the context that it is. Because
Yeah.
normally, like, if you do hear, you know, the I'll just say in terms of happiness, they usually say, oh, like, you know, gay or like stuff like that. But in this context, like they do say like the gay slur.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was very surprised. I did laugh though. I thought it was really funny, especially like the one where Jennifer's like, oh, you know how bitchy they can be, or even Neely
Yeah.
when she goes and when she's talking about how she's with Ted Casablanca, which, by the way, what a name. And she's like, and I'm the dame to prove it, like just to spite her boyfriend, just to reveal everything. It's all so over the top, but I
Yeah.
think it would have had a lot of power if we really got to see this develop over time.
Yeah. I think you're right too. I think obviously the slurs did not age well. It took me by surprise too. I was like, "Oh, okay." Um,
And this film is considered PG-13.
yeah.
Which
Um,
I was surprised for its time frame. I thought it would have been considered an R-rated movie upon its release.
well, interesting you say that. You know, the Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is NC-17.
Yeah, it's different though. It's not based off Jacqueline. It's definitely based off this movie, which I'm going to be honest, I have not seen
I
Beyond the
haven't
Valley of
either.
the
No,
Dolls.
no, I haven't either. I just know that it's rated much higher than the original, which I thought was interesting. But
Mhm.
you're right, yeah, and some of the themes too. You would have thought that it would have been R, not because there's anything graphic in my opinion, but there's the character that goes into porn. Neely is
Yeah, and we kind of
drug
see,
addict.
we do see glimpses of, and you can see like some boobies and some
Mhm.
private bits here and there. So that's why I was surprised it was considered PG-13 for its time frame. Um, I love this. This film has a special. This is one of those films where I can watch over and over again,
Me too.
and just love it. I think there's also it's brilliant directing. Brilliant directing. I love the colors. I love the little montages, and it just makes it all feel more real. Like when you see
Yeah.
Ann Wells now as the Gillian girl, it just makes it so much more believable because they do the infomercials and like the commercials and all stuff like that just so fantastic. Um Even little Neely O'Hara's little montage of when she's getting herself like,
Yeah,
thin and
yeah.
ready and he's doing all like the little jumping exercise. I always love that. And fun fact, the score of this movie was actually done by legendary John Williams. You know, the guy who does like every good movie the score for.
Yeah, yeah.
This was his first ever nomination for an Oscar as well.
Wow, I didn't know it was his first.
Yeah.
That's actually a cool fact. So, and I need to ask you a question.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
after I watched it with you the first time, I loved it. I thought it was so cute. I love the 60s themed. I love the drama. I love the message. But you look this movie up and it has a very low score on everything. Like,
Hmm.
why do you think that is? Because I love it. I appreciate it. And I know you appreciate it for what it is. But, critics, IMDb, Google, like they all give it like,
It's so ridiculous.
yeah.
That's the thing. It's so ridiculous. Like in a way where it's just like I said, it's over the top. And I think the reason why, and I think also it attributes to timeline. How we go from 1 second, Jennifer North is everything is good. She's with Tony Poehler. It all works out. And
Yeah.
then half an hour later, she's killing herself. Like it's very like because of time, even though like you and me, we like complex stories, we can eat that up. But I can definitely see people going, hold on, where's the buildup? What's
Yeah.
going on?
Okay.
What
I'll give it that.
happened? And then
Um,
also, there's so many points where Neely is just off her rocker. Like when she's in the alleyway, just screaming. Like it's there's so definitely some cheesy bits in the film. Like when Neely is in the alleyway, just screaming, and like she even looks up to the sky and goes, "God!" Like it's so cheesy, but I love it. I love it.
No,
But I could
okay, I
definitely
can
see
see that,
why.
yeah.
And
Okay.
I also think it frowned upon a dream to many people. That's why
Yeah.
a film like this today isn't super duper successful, because it's still kind of it shows the reality and harsh, and
Yeah.
even it relates today. Like, sadly, there was a recent quote by Stevie Nicks, who she requested that anyone who wants to get famous set aside $30,000 for rehab immediately,
Oh my
like
god.
before you even try. So I could see why many people would downplay it, because it almost in a way downplayed one of America's favorite dreams, Like, everyone at some point had like, oh, I want to be famous, and this just kind of was like, here you go, this is what happens.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when you see that, you second guess if you're just kind of like, oh, maybe I don't want to be a singer or an actress, because I also think it shows you how hard that life is. Obviously, Neely became sort of this stage brat, and she got really addicted to drugs, but you kind of look at that from the outside and you're just kind of like, what is that? I would never happen to me. But you don't really know until you're in that position, and I think that's what the film is trying to tell us.
Absolutely. And I I think also, with this film, another reason why people could have not liked it, it's a balancing act, meaning you have romance, you have drama, you have
Yeah.
musical, which, by the way, let's talk about the music real quick. Loved it.
Great.
Absolutely love it. I sing the score all the time.
It was great.
I love the music, and I know Patty Duke wasn't a fan because that's not her singing, and she
Oh,
sang on her
wow.
show, and they dubbed her. But if you listen, that you can find that, it's like Patty Duke revisits Valley of the Dolls, and it's her original recordings. It's a bit rough. I
Oh,
don't know.
really?
Someone just mixed her badly or not, because I've heard her sing in the Patty Duke show, and she sings great.
Yeah.
Oh, it was. I don't know if maybe she like smoked, like chain smoked like 5 cigarettes before recording. It was just so raspy, and I know it also didn't do well, like in terms of box office. It never really got around, and it really only resurfaced. Like, no one talked about this movie when it came out in the '60s or '67. They only talked about it a few years later when Sharon Tate died. They actually
Mm.
re-released the film
Wow, I
when
didn't know
she had
that.
passed, and that's when it started gaining traction. And I think it was I think it's so I think it's really crazy how Sharon Tate, plays an actress who kind of everyone looks at her for her face and body, and that's what she was in real life. Sadly, no one ever looked at Sharon Tate and thought, wow, she's an amazing actress. They always go, wow, she was so stunning, wow,
Yeah.
she was so beautiful. And I think it's really shameful, because I do like her acting in here. I like all of their acting in here.
Yeah, I do too.
Um, but I could definitely see why she wanted a role like this, and how when this re-released, it was kind of like, whoa, like this is how she must have felt. Not necessarily like the porn industry aspect of
No,
it, but
no,
in
no, no.
terms of,
Yeah.
you know, she might have felt that all she had was her looks.
I think, yeah, and I think it's very sad that it took her really tragic death to get this movie some attention, because I feel like it was probably dismissed, like you said in the beginning, because people were like, "What? This is ridiculous. This is
Yeah.
crazy." And then she died, and everyone's just like, "Oh yeah, Sharon Tate." So I see what you're saying there, and I feel bad that it took that for this movie to get the attention it deserved.
Hmm.
Have you seen any of her other movies? Because I haven't. This is the only Sharon Tate film I've ever seen.
I don't think I've ever seen any of her other films. I really, none of them are popping into my head or anything. I think, like, in terms of, she really didn't get a fair chance. Like, she died 2 years later after this film.
Yeah.
So this was like her first big role. And in terms of actresses, she's only been credited in 11 things, whether it be TV shows, movies, and they were a lot of like little stuff here and there. And even in oh man, what was the Wrecking Crew? That was like the one that they talked about in the oh my God, what's the name of it? Tarantino, Hollywood. What's the name of it? You know what I'm talking about, Sweet Pea.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were you mute? Is that, I felt like real dumb. I was like,
No, I was, and I was trying to talk to you, and I realized I was like, oh, I muted myself by accident. So yeah, Once
Because
Upon a
that
Time
was
in
the one
Hollywood.
with Dean Martin. That was after. This film. So she did Valley of the Dolls. She was in a film called Fearless Vampire Killers, which I'm
What?
sure didn't get a lot of traction. So it was this film, The Wrecking Crew, and then that was that.
Oh my God.
Like, she really only had like 2 big films that people knew about. She was in another horror film too, but like definitely nothing that people would know about for sure. But
so okay, yeah, okay.
I just say in regards, I think that this actually, in terms of her career, definitely gave her a spotlight that she most deserved, and that we could have all known if she was able to stick around with us longer, like, you know, with the tragic event and everything. But yeah, and did you know that in the end of the film, do you remember when Neely is in her trailer, and not in the trailer, in the changing room for Broadway, her last Broadway play, and she's drunk?
Yeah.
Do you remember who gets her out of her changing room?
I know it's a man. I can't see his face.
It's Richard Dreyfuss.
Really?
Yeah, it was his little acting debut.
What? I would have never guessed. I didn't pay too much attention.
Because I was watching and I was like, is that Richard Dreyfuss? And I looked it up and it says acting debut of Richard Dreyfuss.
What? I gotta pay attention next time. Crazy.
So, okay, overall, what would you give Valley of the Dolls?
Because I love it for what it is, I gotta give it an 8.5.
I think because for me, the rewatchability, the fact that I find that I go to myself over and over again with this film, and although I do notice its flaws, I think everything else about the film is stellar. Like, this film really just has like a little piece of my heart. I'm gonna have to give it a 9.5.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where I have fun every time I watch it.
No,
I really enjoy it. Like, this is honestly like, because I love Last Tango in Paris. I love The Thing, but there's so many times you can watch Last Tango in Paris in a month. Like, I could see myself watching this several times a month if I was crazy.
No, you made a good point. The rewatchability of this movie is crazy. Like, it's great. So
I'm also a big fan of the book. I read the book and the sequel. So which, by the way, if you ever want to borrow, let me know, because they're really good.
Read the book. Yeah.
They're a little bit different, but I really feel like in terms of book adaptations, it really just does capture the overall, the height of everything, and, you know, the drama. And it does take place in a different time frame.
Right, of course.
The book takes place in the 40s and 50s, whereas this takes place in the 60s. But I think the adaptation was absolutely fantastic.
All right. I got to check it out.
Mm-hmm. We definitely have to check out Beyond the Valley of the Dolls too.
Yeah, because that's in the Criterion, so that would be interesting.
Not only that, but I think yes, I knew it. It's written by Roger Ebert.
What?
Yep.
You're joking.
It's written by Roger Ebert.
I would have guessed 100 people before I guessed Robert Ebert. No.
I know. I really wonder now how obviously he must have had liked Valley of the Dolls in order. Hold on, I gotta look this up. Did he could you imagine he was like, no, I hated Valley of the Dolls, so I made my own. Like, that would just be the coldest thing. But yeah, I remember when it went into the Criterion Collection and I saw like, oh, directed by this, written by Roger Ebert. I was like, that Roger Ebert?
I don't see him writing a film like this.
He gave it an awful score. Why would you do that?
His own movie?
No, to Valley of the Dolls, the OG.
Oh, maybe that's why he wrote the other one. He's like you said, he's like, I'm gonna make my own. Screw
but
that.
It's not that far. In terms of critic score, like, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls only has like 0.7 points higher. It's not like a huge leap or anything.
Oh, so no.
Weird. Very weird. But I definitely do. I feel like it has. I definitely think Beyond the Valley of the Dolls was like Roger Ebert's way of saying, you want to see real industry and then just put a lot of nude women on the screen. I mean, like, that's like the only thing that, because it is NC-17 Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy, crazy.
Okay. I mean, maybe we could put it on the list at some point. But what are we reviewing next?
Ooh, let me pull up the schedule. I believe, okay, so based off my memory, so we are going to be talking about, it's a deep dive into depression next week, because we're going to be talking about Come and See, the 39 Steps, and a short film called Man in the Well.
I'm really nervous to watch Come and See because of our Criterion group of what they said about it.
I'm so ready. I'm so ready to watch this.
Nervous.
And then the following week, it's a little spooky. It's spooky week because we're doing Interview with a Vampire, The Vampire, a short film, and another creepy short film I found on the Criterion channel called The Black Case.
I'm so excited.
So yeah, so the first things is the 39 Steps, Come and See, and Man in the Well.
This is,
which are all available on the Criterion channel. So if you have not seen those films, catch up with us because we're going to be talking about it next week. But yeah, as always, thank you to Homeboy James for always just supporting us and subscribing to our Patreon. And yeah, if you want a little shout out, check out our Patreon. Link is in the below. And also be sure to definitely check out our friends GoFundMe page. Give it a little share if you absolutely can. But no pressure to donate. Also on Audemic Media, I do not think I announced this last week. But I did a little interview with my grandma talking about the time where she was robbed at JCPenney's in the 60s. Wow, it all goes together. That is available under the audio drama section on audemicmedia.com. So definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun. My grandma's really, really funny and great. But yeah, until then, we'll see you next time when we talk about Come and See, 39 Steps, and Man in the Well. Bye.